morning, everybody. I watched a video this morning. Well, I listened to a video, actually. Wasn't able to watch it at the time. From PragerU called No Classroom is Apolitical. And I highly recommend this video, but for me personally, this video was very eye-opening because it taught me a lot about the difference between the American conservative ideology and the left, which I consider to be un-American. And it really opened my eyes and educated me and enlightened me about what the left has as their ideology today, which is quite frightening to me. It's nothing new. You know, King Solomon said in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. It's definitely true. But it's frightening to me that this ideology has become so overwhelmingly accepted, and unquestionably so. And we need to work hard to win back the hearts and minds of our youth if we're going to see any change in this, because it's quite scary. And I think that the method of doing this, the way we're going to accomplish this, is by embracing a man who we celebrated last week, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and his ideology, because that's really what's being argued against today by today's American left. And again, in that time, in those days, in the 1960s, and you had two men who were arguing opposite approaches, were Dr. King and Malcolm X, right? And it seems that the ideology of Malcolm X has been embraced in a way that we would never expect to happen in America. And I'll talk about two instances of, conversations I had on social media of late. I think we can address these issues. So first, some time ago, we were discussing former President Donald Trump, who now holds the office of the former president, which if Joe Biden could have the office of the president-elect, which is ridiculous and nonsensical and frankly illegal, then the office of the former president makes a lot of sense. It makes more sense, actually, than the office of the president-elect. But I still think that because it is an actual, he wanted to make the argument based on Secret Service protection. Well, that starts already when you're a candidate. It's not. I don't think that's the barometer. But by virtue of the fact that the president, the former president, does have what I would call the office of the former president in a certain sense, is that he's. It's not merely that he's still under Secret Service protection, but it's essentially collecting a pension, even though I'm sure he's not going to take it, things like that. But let's move on from that. That's not really the subject at hand. But essentially, someone said to me, which I couldn't understand, is that President Trump constantly said, he's the least racist person in the room. And then a person I was arguing with said to me, he said, you have to admit, if someone says I'm the least racist person, that means that they're the most racist person. And I didn't understand, what on earth are they saying? Where is this? What does that even mean? And so this video explained a little bit how that ideology works that calls itself anti-racism, that's really the most racist ideology. And then the other thing was on Twitter, someone posted something on Martin Luther King Day that they need to have Malcolm X Day. And so my question was, are you talking about pre-Hajj Malcolm X or post-Hajj Malcolm X? And then they responded with a meme with someone going like this, and said, why can't it be both? And I declined from answering, although I'm going to answer it here. I doubt the person who wrote that is going to see this video, although maybe they might. And essentially, well, there's a major difference between Malcolm X before the Hajj and Malcolm X after the Hajj, and that's why he was assassinated after the Hajj, because of his change in his ideology. Was that Malcolm X before the Hajj was a racist, and Malcolm X after the Hajj was not a racist. But now I'm enlightened in the same way of what exactly this ideology that calls itself anti-racism, that's the most racist ideology that I could imagine that could be embraced in America at this point in history, although I think it's a harbinger of worse things that are possible to come. And you know, in the end, who knows how bad it's going to get, and what kind of evil we're going to see manifest in America if we don't stop this now. And why, I constantly have been saying that President Biden is the most racist office holder in the United States since George Wallace. And then someone says, "But look at all the black women that he put into positions." And I said, that's tokenism, and that's something that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King fought against, tokenism. Of merely saying, look, we have a black person, we have a woman, we have a this, we have a that, meaning it didn't mean anything to the left when President Trump appointed Rick Grenell to the highest position that any openly homosexual identified person ever held, because he didn't do it because Rick Grenell was gay. He did it because Rick Grenell was, in his mind, the best person for the job. And so forth and so on. When President Trump followed what Dr. King said, to judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin, and that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? That was seen as racist by the left because it wasn't sufficiently anti-racist, because what is this term that they use, anti-racism? It is racism. When the left says anti-racism, they mean racism. Because the Republican classical liberal view is race doesn't matter. We are all made in the image of God. And these accidents of birth or other identity politics issues are meaningless. And we consider ourselves to be colorblind. To the left, that's not acceptable. And the reason is along the lines of what Malcolm X taught. Because Malcolm X taught that the black community should not be judged by virtue of the white ideology and the white culture. And I can hear that. And he makes a good argument, but the reason why I reject it is because I don't see how the world is going to survive in that manner, where we're inexorably divided into these various factions. And I sincerely believe that still to this day, the Democrats remain the old Dixiecrats. And they remain the same racists that they've always been. And just because one side is benefiting over the other doesn't make it right. And that, before it was this side that was being pushed down and the other side that's being elevated, and then now it's reversed perhaps. That's, I think, the essence of the Democrat ideology, as opposed to, again, the Republican ideology, is that there are no sides. We're all the same. But the pre-Hodge Malcolm X view would be, well, no, we're not the same. And to someone like Malcolm X, it would be the equivalent of taking someone, from Mars and imposing Earth's ideas and ideologies and politics onto a Martian. And that's essentially what the white man did to the black man, according to Malcolm X. The thing is this is not something that happened yesterday. Meaning Christianity was in Kenya and in Ethiopia for a very long time, probably before it reached most of Europe. And so Christianity is not the white man's religion. It's a religion that embraces the universal ideology of the Torah of Judaism, the universal ideas of human rights. And I say that as I am not a Christian, I am a Jew, but I recognize that that's, I believe, what we would call the essence of the Judeo-Christian ethic, is human rights. And it's not a white versus black thing. And that's the mistake, I think, that people like Malcolm X made, pre-Hodge Malcolm X, in thinking that this issue is white versus black. And really it goes back to, a lot of these neo-pagan ideologies that I've encountered, in my ministry as a prison chaplain. That again, the certain elements of the neo-pagan world see it that Christianity was this Jewish idea imposed on the white man, right? And it's interesting to me, because on Martin Luther King Day I listened to two interviews. I listened to an interview, I believe it was from the BBC, with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, which was very enlightening and interesting. And then an interview with a professor from UCLA, I believe, with Malcolm X, which is also very enlightening and interesting. And I appreciate the ability to hear both sides of this. And at one point, Malcolm X was talking about a black national movement returning to Africa with the reparations that were just so they could get back on their feet and go do their own thing in the black way in Africa, instead of aping the white way in America, or assimilating into the white culture in America. And I immediately thought that this sounds like Zionism, and that's what the professor said. And then Malcolm X said, and precisely for that reason, no Zionist should be opposed to the Nation of Islam's ideology. At least at that time, I don't know if that's what Farrakhan believes today about making a colony in Africa or something. Because we did that. It was called Liberia. And it didn't really work out that well. I mean, it's still around, and we didn't make Liberia a colony of America. It's an independent country right from the beginning, but it hasn't really worked that well, to be honest. And I don't think that's a racist statement, but maybe Malcolm X's point would be that that's because they're trying to use the white model, right, in Africa, and it wouldn't work. And then his argument against Zionism would be that the Zionists took white people and put them on the land of brown people, and so the Nation of Islam's idea would be more morally correct because it would be bringing black people back to their native land, which again goes to so in any event, I'm not a Zionist, and I'm an anti-Zionist really. Last night I started a chavrusa with someone learning Vayel Moshe again, and how clear Sefer Vayel Moshe is. It's quite a strong and powerful Sefer, and it has very strong points in it. And it is something that's essentially logical. But in any event, I reject the ideology of Malcolm X. Now, again, I don't fargin if that's what people want to do and go up and leave and do that. I don't think it's a great idea, because again, I personally don't see it as a white versus black issue or a racial issue. I see it as essentially an issue relating back to what the difference is between a pagan worldview and a Judeo-Christian worldview. This was a discussion that we had another video that I watched, the difference between the indigenous theology and the monotheist theology, and the difference between time and space. And how the indigenous pagan ideology is so connected to space and location. Again, both sides, both the pagan and the monotheist, have both time and space in their theology. But to the pagan, there's an emphasis on space. To the indigenous person, there's an emphasis on space. And to the monotheist, there's an emphasis on time. And I believe that's how Judaism was able to survive our exile, is by letting go of the emphasis on space, retaining it very loosely, because essentially, the indigenous approach would be a Sundance, of the certain, I guess, the Pueblo people. I'm not sure which people it is that have the Sundance in the American Southwest. Only happens there. You could go and visit Australia or Africa or China, but if the Sundance is going on in Arizona or Colorado, wherever it is. I'm not sure. I'm not that educated about this. You cannot celebrate the Sundance in China or India or Australia or New Zealand or even in New York or even in Denver, Colorado, if it's taking place in another part of Colorado. It only happens there. Whereas Christmas is Christmas everywhere. It might be a different day in Russia and in Greece than it is in England or in Germany, but it's Christmas wherever it is. And even to the point where if a German is visiting Russia, he might be able to find a Lutheran church in Russia. I don't know if they have Lutheran churches in Russia, because I know Russia, they outlaw certain churches. I think the Lutherans they probably would allow, but I don't know how many Lutheran churches there are in Russia. Or a Brit might find an Anglican church in Greece. Again, I don't know if such a thing exists. But the point would be is, and then for them, Christmas is when Christmas is in England, even if it's not when Christmas is in Greece or Russia. And the Jews found a balance, at least rabbinical Judaism, which I believe to be the authentic Judaism, found a balance because yes, it's true. Certain things you can only do in the Beis HaMikdash. Right? I cannot bring the Paschal sacrifice outside the temple. But I can still have a Pesach Seder and just not have the Paschal lamb in Monticello, New York, or in Scranton, Pennsylvania, or in Waukegan, or in Cincinnati, or in Miami Beach, or in Panama City, or in Rio de Janeiro. It's still a Pesach Seder, and I'm still doing these mitzvahs that I can do, and there's just the one that I can't do. It's the Korban Pesach, and I guess the Korban Chagiga, Paschal sacrifice, and the festival sacrifice. That I can only do in Jerusalem, and right now in Jerusalem we can't do that either. By embracing this approach, we're able to have a portable religion. And then to a certain point, it went to where the Christian churches really don't have this idea, except perhaps the Mormons, where they have a temple. They have several temples that, you have sacred space for certain things that you can't do in other places. But the Mass that's celebrated in the Vatican is really the same as the Mass that's celebrated in Honesdale, Pennsylvania, in the Catholic Church, and certainly Protestant churches. Whatever happens, it's nothing really special to a certain place, or even really essentially to a certain time. It's more or less, oh, these are nice things that we do, but they're not essential. And so really, the Odinist has much more in common with the Nation of Islam than either of them have with the Christian or the Jew or the Muslim, the traditional, Sunni Muslim, or even Shia Muslim. Certainly not the Sufi. The Sufi is again more like us, which Sufi could be Shia or Sunni. And so by embracing this is what the issue is, and this is what America was supposed to be all about, because every other country in the world essentially had that idea. Every other country in the world said, well, nationalism. America doesn't have nationalism. America has Americanism. And the idea of Americanism is rooted not theologically, but ideologically in the Judeo-Christian value of the worth of the individual over the collective. And that's what the left is trying to wipe out. They want to impose collectivism on our society, which is not progressive, it is regressive. And so when they speak of anti-racism, it is racism. When their anti-colonialism is really nationalism and colonial, and because, like we said before, the colonialists, we've mentioned this many times, they brought something to their colonies. Like the story that we said about the what on earth is this? Of the British colonialist who told the Indian Hindu priest that, we'll respect your tradition of burning widows if you respect our tradition of hanging men who burn innocent widows. We're not going to force you to worship our God. We're not going to force you to abandon your gods. But we are going to force you to have the idea of human rights. And that goes back to this whole issue of the fight between the 1619 Project and the 1976 Project. Because I don't think the 1776 Project, I don't think the 1776 Project realized how evil the 1619 Project is. Because it's not merely saying that America started because of slavery, this and that. It's saying that we cannot be together. It's a separatist document, the 1619 Project. It's separatist that seeks to identify a demographic and embrace collectivism. It's essentially Marxist, and it's regressive, and it's pagan. And that's why they say that the 1776 Project is racist, because it's blind to racism. They're feeling the Malcolm X ideology of, the white man is forcing his white ideology on the black man, which is not the case, because the Judeo-Christian ethic is neither white nor black. It's colorblind. If anything, again, the tribalism of the white nationalist and the tribalism of the black nationalist are the same thing, whereas the universalism of the Judeo-Christian and Islamic ethic, the post-Hajj Malcolm X, it can't be both. When the guy asked, why can't it be both? It can't be both. It can't be both. And so for Donald Trump to say, well, I want to help everybody, and so the black person will benefit like the white person benefits, the self-proclaimed anti-racist brands that as racism when it isn't. It's the opposite of racism. that's what we have to remember, and that's what we have to embrace, is that the essential Abrahamic idea, where Avram Avinu was Av Hamon Goyim, that Abraham was the father of many nations, to teach that we're all the children of Adam and Eve. And so the pagan doesn't want to accept that. The black nationalists and the white nationalists don't want to accept that we are brothers and sisters, no matter the color of our skin. And the Democrat doesn't want to accept that, because they lose their demographic. But the Abraham Lincoln, Abrahamic Republican, that embraces Abraham, our father, as well as Abraham Lincoln, recognizes this. I'll just end off with a cute story that I saw Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, the Rav of the oldest congregation in America, pointed out that when he's growing up in Chicago, there was an immigrant family from Thailand who was very proud that living in Illinois, the land of Lincoln, they wanted to learn, who is this Lincoln? They read a book about Abraham Lincoln. And they were so impressed by this that they went and bought a statue of Abraham Lincoln and put offerings in front of this statue. Every meal that they ate, they had a portion of each meal that they presented in front of the statue as an offering, a sacrifice to and the veneration of Abraham Lincoln. But then they said there's one type of food they never would serve to Abraham Lincoln, and that was pork, because they don't want to give a Jew named Abraham any pork. They didn't want to offend him. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and let me know what you think. Am I totally off kilter? Am I actually a racist because I reject the modern anti-racist movement as racist? I don't know. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd like to listen. I'd like to hear different views on this issue. So let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you.